Many players in Rise of Kingdoms find themselves running out of legendary commander sculptures. They just don't have enough to go around, and there's multiple ways that you can solve this problem. Honestly, the best way to solve it is to be super patient and be very deliberate with which commanders you invest in. But I also know that some players find themselves about to go into a big fight in KvK and they need to invest their sculpture somewhere, but they don't have enough to max out a commander. And again, that is oftentimes a very big mistake, but there are a couple of commanders in Rise of Kingdoms that are very usable before you unlock their expertise. And so today we're going to take a look at 10 legendary commanders with a couple of honorable mentions that you can start using out on the battlefield before you unlock their expertise, and for just a few hundred legendary commander sculptures. But before we jump in, of course, what's going on, guys? Cheers. Now, as you guys know, I am a sponsored partnered creator with Rise of Kingdoms, so if you want more Rise of Kingdoms content, make sure you drop a thumbs up down below. It is the single best way to help your favorite creators, and subscribe down below because a lot of you think you're subbed but you're actually not, so just double check. All right, folks, without further ado, let's jump right in here, and this video is going to be broken down into different troop types. So if you're looking specifically for a cavalry commander or infantry commander or archer commander, use the timestamps down below. The first group of commanders that we're going to talk about, however, are the honorable mentions. Okay, and the first honorable mention commander here is actually Mehmed. Now, a lot of times in these videos where we discuss 5511 commanders or 5515 or however the configuration is, I often mention Mehmed as an honorable mention, and the reason for that is because if you play Rise of Kingdoms for quite a while, you are going to get a lot of sculptures of Mehmed from the gold keys, and as a leadership commander, he really is sort of a jack of all trades in that you can throw him as secondary to a lot of different commanders in the game right now, and he'll perform okay. He won't be insane, but for a commander that is literally free, I mean, you'll just get him over time. Never spend universal sculptures on him, by the way. He's definitely somebody that we have to mention here. Now, the reason for this is because his active skill at 5 deals 1150 damage to up to 5 enemy troops in a fan. This is a pretty low damage factor for 2026 standards. Frankly, it would need to be multiplied by 2 in order to be relevant right now, and even then that's like on the low end. But the beauty of Mehmed comes in his stats. Okay, so he gives you a universal 20% attack and 20% skill damage, and that's just across the board. So this is going to be really great for those commander pairs where, of course, if you're running archers, right, then like this is beautiful for archers. No march speed, so that's definitely a downside, but also archers are kind of used to having one of their commanders not have march speed. If we look at YSG, we look at Yu Liang, so saying, oh, he's got no march speed is like, that's true, and that is definitely a downside, but with archers, that's already kind of expected, right, at least with one of your commander pairs. So if you don't have YSG, you don't have Zhuge Liang, you could do Emperor Qin with Mehmed, and it won't be nearly as good, but it will be something that you could definitely use for free. The third skill is just for hitting cities, but the fourth skill gives you 10% troop capacity, which is really nice. I mean, the more troops you have, the more damage you can deal. Just be careful because it also means the faster your hospital will fill up. But the other thing about Mehmed is that he has a tier 3 relic in the museum, which gives you 40% health, 10% skill damage. So frankly, he has a much better stat distribution than somebody like Seong-Gye, right? Now, of course, Seong has double the amount of skill damage bonus, right? So there's that. But again, Mehmed is literally free. You're going to get him from gold keys, and you can get this relic to tier 3 without having to max Mehmed at all, right? At 5511, he'll have a 5 target skill damage, 20% attack, 40% health, 30% skill damage. So again, is he best in class? Absolutely not. But for a totally free commander, I had to mention him here because there might be instances where you can flex Mehmed into your lineup and get some value out of him. Now, it's not just archers that you can use him with, because recently with the introduction of the wedge 2 formation, some of you may find yourselves still running skill damage infantry or skill damage cavalry. So you could do something like a Hua primary, Mehmed secondary, or you could do something like a CPO prime primary with Mehmed secondary. Just make sure you stack as much march speed on there as possible. But really, the wedge formation 2 gives you quite a bit more skill damage, which might keep him a little bit more relevant now than he was just a month or two ago. Now, the other two honorable mentions that I'm going to bring up here are actually both engineering commanders, and that is none other than Gonzalo de Cordoba and Margaret the First. Now, the reason for this is because both of these commanders get a tremendous amount of value at 5511. Really, 2400 ranged smite damage AoE is really good here. This second skill at 5 for Cordoba gives you 20% attack, 15% march speed, and 10% smite damage, which is just a bonus to his active skill. Third skill at 1 gives you a tiny bit of defense, but the main thing you want here is stacking vigilance, and you're still going to have a 50% chance no matter what this skill is at to do that. And the fourth skill at 1 is still going to give you a 10% chance for 20% bonus range normal damage, which is pretty good. Now Margaret, on the other hand, again, first skill at 5 gives you 50% more ranged normal damage. So you use her as the primary, you use Cordoba as the secondary, and now Cordoba's active skill is popping off at ranged. Her second skill gives you 20% attack, 20% march speed, and a 10% chance to gain 20% more normal damage for 3 seconds. Third skill gives you some ranged skill damage, which you don't really care about for this march anyway. And the fourth skill gives you bonus damage just across the board. It's only 1%, but still, what you really like here is the defense reduction at range, right? And no matter what this skill is at, it's still a 10% chance, right? So free range defense reduction is insane. So again, honorable mention here, because really I know a lot of people don't have a ranged march, and they're becoming, it feels like, more and more niche as time goes on. So this budget build might not be for everybody, but if you do just want to, you know, dip your toe into the ranged meta and see what it's all about, its glory days seem to be a little bit behind it right now, although who knows with whatever the next release is for ranged. But for less than 400 sculptures, you could try this out with purple gear, and maybe in certain scenarios you can do pretty well. Also worth noting too that Margaret has the support tree, which recently was buffed. Loose formation and emergency protection are now more tanky than ever, so definitely something to consider. Okay, now let's talk about some budget build commanders for cavalry, and the first commander we're going to start with here is technically, I know this is going to be ridiculous, but it's technically not a cavalry commander. It is Hector himself. He is a leadership commander, but the reason that I'm bundling him into the cavalry section of this video is because really he would mostly be used with cavalry, but also you can flex him in a bunch of different places. I just happen to really like him for calves over everything else, and as a budget build 5515, I feel like Hector is actually not that bad if you use him as secondary to somebody like King Arthur. So his active skill at 5 for cavalry is going to launch 2 combo attacks, so a total of 2800 damage factor to 1 target, so not AoE but 1 target, and for the next 3 seconds up to 5 nearby enemy troops take 5% more normal damage. So a little bit of supportive nature there, a little bit of an AoE debuff, which is nice. And frankly, you know, you're going to be dealing a lot of combo damage, and your infantry armies deal smite damage, so this helps them as well, so we like that. The second skill here gives you 20% march speed, 10% health, 30% defense, which is actually really tanky for cavalry, which they kind of need, especially because their gear gives them a bunch of health. A lot of times they don't get defense from their commanders, right? I know Hua was kind of the exception there, but all the other cavalry commanders give you a lot of attack and a little bit of health, or vice versa. The third skill at 1, you still take 5% less normal damage, which is half the value there. And then for cavalry, it says when you launch a basic attack, you have a 20% chance to launch an extra combo attack with a damage factor of 200. So it's like, okay, well, that's still half the value of that as well, right? So you're getting 50% of this skill's value just by unlocking it and leaving it at 1. And a lot of times, you know, your extra combo attacks, like the damage from them is nice, but the real value of a combo attack is that it also has a chance to trigger other things like talents, or, you know, inscriptions, or tier 5 stuff on your equipment, right? So just the fact that you have the extra combo attack is nice. And don't forget, this is basically like the expertise on Liu Che minus the rage regeneration, right? For Hector, it's a 20% chance for 200 damage factor or combo attack. For Liu Che, it's 25% chance with some rage. So yeah, Liu Che's expertise is definitely better, but again, this is a skill at 1, and we're comparing that to an expertise, right? Also, you can possibly trigger this up to 3 times per second. The downside is it's got a huge cooldown, right? Now, that also is kind of why you don't mind this being at 1, because if this doesn't pop that often anyway, then just leave it at 1, right? The fourth skill at 5 for cavalry says every second their troop has a 50% chance to gain 20% bonus normal damage for the next 5 seconds with a 7-second cooldown. Yes, it's still a long cooldown, but it's better than the third skill's cooldown, and that's just raw damage, right? I mean, that is, your combo attacks are going to deal more damage with this skill. Okay, now let's talk about actual cavalry commanders, and the next one we have to talk about is David the IV. And David IV is a garrison commander, but he is surprisingly decent as a budget build. Now let me be clear, you should not be investing in David if you're a free-to-play player or a low spender. Like really, this is a commander you would get if you're getting 3 cavalry armies and you want to flex him in somewhere. Maybe you can use this as a budget build, especially if you're on your way to maxing him out for garrison anyway, right? But I wanted to mention him here because he does have a 3 target fan-shaped combo attack, 2800 damage factor, and he cleanses 3 slow poison, exhaustion, or normal debuffs from this commander's troop. And this is going to be especially important in the open field now that we have Alp Arslan in the game. Okay, Alp is going to be spreading so many debuffs across so many different commanders. It's going to be insane. So in a way, David's open field value kind of went up a little bit with Alp Arslan landing in Rise of Kingdoms, especially because he clears that poison. Kind of wild. Unfortunately, he won't cleanse the pierce stacks, but still he cleanses 3 of the 4 things that Alp Arslan can actually spread on the field. The second skill gives you 35% defense, no march speed, but that's not a huge deal for cavalry. It's not nothing, but I mean, it's okay. If there's going to be one troop type that doesn't have march speed, calves would be the one that you could get away with it. And again, like we said before, calves often don't have a lot of defense, so this is kind of nice. Third skill you can skip, and the fourth skill at 5 says whenever this commander troop uses an active skill while attacking a troop on the map, which you would be doing in the open field, the target takes 40% more combo damage for 3 seconds with a 5-second cooldown. Really nice stuff here. Now again, you can either do 5515 or you could even do 5511, because this is still, you get really good value out of this. Even at 1, it's a 5-second cooldown. Like if it's just for the field, I mean, maybe you would do 5511, but again, like you shouldn't invest in him just for field. It should be on the way to expertising him. Next, let's talk about Gangemchan. Now this is a commander that's a little bit controversial because he landed in the game, he's single target damage. It's like, you know, like we don't really love single target damage here, but the value with Gangemchan is actually that he's very tanky, and that is kind of an underrated thing for cavalry to have right now. Before Gangemchan came into the game, calves were so insanely squishy, it wasn't even funny. The only exception there was Attila, and it's not even that Attila's tanky, it's that he just hurts really bad when you swarm him, right? Giving your cavalry some longevity in the field with Gangemchan is really nice, and the fact that you can do it as a budget build is pretty good. The way you would do this is 5551. Of course, the active skill, you want max, this deals the most amount of damage possible. Without the expertise, unfortunately, it's a 2400 instead of 3000, but still it's really good. Also, the buff to your army is not as good, but I mean, that's not that many stats anyway, if we're being honest with ourselves. The second skill at 5, you take 10% less damage on the map. Like that's just, I mean, that's fantastic. 20% march speed, 30% defense. There's that defense again. Man, maybe I was just wrong. Maybe there is a lot of defense on calves. Am I just stupid? I don't know. In my head, when I think of the best cavalry commanders, I'm thinking about King Arthur, Achilles, and then I'm just used to the fact that William and Joan don't have it, right? Anyway, the third skill at 5 gives you 15% more normal damage, which is a bonus to your combo damage as well. And this is where you're going to convert your damage to healing. And then the fourth skill, at being just at 1, you have a 30% chance to reduce the target's defense by 20% instead of 40%. So yes, obviously a 40% defense reduction is much better, but again, this is still half the value for just unlocking this, which we really like. Next, let's talk about Achilles, because this is a fan favorite cavalry commander right now, and there's a couple of ways that you could do this, and this was actually brought to my attention by one of my viewers. I don't remember the exact name, so I do apologize, but you could either do 5551 or 5515 and run them as a budget build. Now originally my knee-jerk reaction was 5515, because really you want the maximum amount of normal damage here on the fourth skill, because that's just guaranteed stats, right? I mean, it's guaranteed normal damage every single time your active skill pops. You're gonna see that for both him and your other commander you're pairing it with, right? Of course, the first 2 skills you need maxed, because this is just circular 5 target AoE. This is 40% attack, 10% health, 20% march speed. This is all your stats, right? So you need those 2. The third skill, however, here's the thing, right? At 1, you take 1% less damage. At max, it's 5. Yes, that's better, but it's either way, it's not that tanky. And all incoming skill, combo, and counterattack damage is reduced by 5%. Whenever you reduce a total of 5,000 damage factor, you cast your active skill. Now, the person in my comment section mentioned that you'd rather have this skill maxed rather than the fourth skill, because the higher this goes, right? If this is 5551, then okay, you're reducing 5% damage, and the reduction is 10%. 20% of the skill combo counterattack, and you only need 3,000 mitigated before you cast your active skill as opposed to 5,000, right? So if this skill is maxed, then you actually cast your active skills faster and you're slightly more tanky, right? Whereas with this skill, you just hit harder, right? With your white numbers and with your active skill. And with this at 5, you have up to 20% rage gain speed and 20% attack. So it's kind of a give and take, right? Like you're going to be triggering the third skill less often, but you're going to be firing your active skills more often anyway because of the faster rage gain speed, right? So it's a little bit give and take here. As I said at the beginning, this is a commander that, you know, you can use him as a budget build, but you're probably going to get him expertise at some point, right? So this is only a temporary decision that you have to make. So really you could just do like 5-5 and then unlock the last two, and then wherever the skills go, just use them as that, right? So whether it's 5-5-3-3 or 5-5-4-2 or something like that, like however you want to do it, I don't think you can really go wrong here. Now the last budget build commander we have to talk about for cavalry is King Arthur, and this is probably my favorite budget build commander in the game right now, and that's because you get so much of his value at 5-5-5-1, and even at 5-5-1-1 you still get a lot of value here. So the active skill is a 3-target AoE. It's dealing 2800 damage factor, whether it's skill or combo. Either way, you're getting all the damage there. The second skill is 20% march speed, 30% attack, 20% health. So I like the distribution of stats there, where it's attack heavy but there's still some health, right? Whereas like somebody like Achilles is even more attack skewed. I prefer the 30-20 split on King Arthur. I think it's a bit more balanced. The third skill here, you get half the value just by unlocking this. So it's either 15% combo or skill damage bonus, or it's up to 30 if you max the skill out, right? So again, at 5-5-1-1, still good value, but of course you would prefer to get this up to 30% bonus combo or skill damage. Really nice stuff. And then the fourth skill, why are you okay with leaving this at 1? Well, you still get half the value out of the best part of this skill. Whenever you launch a combo attack or deal direct damage, you have a 30% chance, that doesn't change by the way, right? Whether this is at 1 or 5, this does not change, to reduce the target's rage by 50. So you still get half the value there with the same probability of occurring, and then you gain march speed, right? Which like you don't really care that much about march speed bonuses on cavalry, especially 3-second temporary ones. You're already going to be fast, right? You don't really need that much. So like really a majority of the value out of King Arthur is in the first 3 skills. So you could just leave him at 5-5-1 and have a great commander. Now the expertise is very good. Okay, so getting him expertise is still a great strategy, but again, this is probably my favorite budget commander in the game right now because he has so like probably 90% of his value at 5-5-5-1. Really good stuff. Okay, now let's move on to infantry, and the first commander we're going to talk about is Bai Chi. Now this is a commander that is similar to King Arthur but not as good in terms of value, and that's because you kind of can use him at 5-5-1-1, but really you should expertise him eventually if you're going to get him, and 5-5-1-5 would be even better in my book. So just like all the commanders here, the maximum damage AoE on the first skill, you need to max it. Second skill is all the stats and march speed. Again, you have to max it. But between the second and third skills, the 7 wounds inflicted and the rage gain speed here is not, it's just not that impactful because it's for 1 second, right? It's just for 1 second, and it only occurs when you spend 10 malice stacks when hitting an enemy that has lower health than you. And either way, like you're gaining stacks at the same rate, whether this is at 1 or 5. So to me, the third skill is just not that impactful, and even still, like the damage factor is what you care about. You're still dealing some damage factor at 1. The fourth skill, however, is where you have consistent damage here. Normal damage, it goes from 5% to 10%. Okay, so again, at 1 there's some value there, but at max this is more damage for your active skill, and this is also the skill that's going to stack up bonuses to smite damage. Okay, but really the best part here is the guaranteed normal damage bonus. You might as well max this out. And then the expertise here is like, it's fine, but you get stronger as you get weaker, which is like I just don't love the math there. Really, it's not nothing, but it's like, you know, it's not the best expertise in the game, especially because it's, I mean, these are limited time bonuses, right? When you're reduced to 50%, you deal more damage and take less damage for 6 seconds. But what if you're in and out of combat? Like some of the value of this is just lost through running away because you're low, right? So the expertise isn't really anything insane on Bai Chi. So 5-5-1-5 I would say is really good good budget value. Next, let's talk about Scipio Prime, and this is a commander that we've talked about for years now as a budget commander, and with the introduction of the Wedge 2 formation, which is now just blended into Wedge 1, it's called, I guess, Herald or something like that, I don't know, but either way, skill damage is stronger now than it was a few months ago. And while infantry are not the primary beneficiary of this new Wedge formation 2, some people may not have a second or a third pincer formation, and having Wedge formation upgraded from 5% to 12% is not nothing, right? And Scipio is interestingly placed because he has a really nice health debuff on the active skill. 2k damage factor to 3 targets is kind of like outdated now, but it's not bad. Outside of territory, you have 25% march speed, which is on par with something like Sun Tzu Prime. Right now Sun Tzu Prime has it all the time, but still it's not bad. And if you do him as 5551, the third skill gives you 20% health and a 10% chance to deal 500 damage factor to the target every second for 3 seconds. Yes, it's a long cooldown, but it's 1500 damage factor, right? I mean, that's gonna happen once every skill cycle, maybe a little less frequently than that, but again, we're talking about 60% of stats, march speed that's on par, the active skill's a little bit power crept at this point, and then the fourth skill at 1 says whenever you take skill damage, you have a 50% chance to reduce it by 10% and grant yourself and up to 3 nearby friendly troops a shield of 250, right? So the shielding factor is half the value. The damage reduction here is, you know, we definitely would like it to be higher, but again, at just 1 point, you're still getting something here. And then the expertise is, again, it's not nothing, but back in the day, you used to do Guan Yu primary, CPO secondary, and that's where this really shined, right? Because you were silencing the target, and so you'd gain rage a lot faster. But now we're not seeing that much silence on the battlefield right now, and so that part of the expertise is pretty much useless. So all it is 10% more skill damage, which again is not nothing, but for a commander that is on his way out of the meta, really, and for many players is already out of the meta, if you have him 5551 still, you could do, you know, as a primary to Liu Che secondary, and with the support tree, you know, again, it's stronger now than it was before. It's even more tanky. So again, I wanted to mention him here because some players are still going to use CPO, and I think as a budget build, that's the way to go. And then the final budget commander we'll talk about for infantry is, of course, Sun Tzu Prime. Now, Sun Tzu Prime, I think, is a commander that you should definitely max, right? I mean, the expertise makes it so that way your true damage is just stronger, and the more smite damage you deal in the future, the more true damage you're going to deal. So really, he's built to last, okay? But at 5515, I feel like he actually is quite a good budget build on your way to maxing him out, because even without the expertise, you're still dealing 3000 damage factor to 1 target, and you're still dealing 20% of that smite damage as true damage. So it's, you know, it's not as good, but it's almost there. The second skill gives you all the march speed, health, and attack. Again, just like with King Arthur, I like this distribution of stats here, the 30-20 split with the attack as the advantage. Really nice stuff. Even if it was 30% health, 20% attack, I'd like that a lot. But either way, now the third skill at 1 is another source of stats, but really when you compare it to the fourth skill, you know, I mean, both these skills are good, so it's not even like you must take one over the other. But let's say this skill is only at 1, you still get 10% defense. Okay, so now we're up to a total of 60% of stats, which is really good. You still deal 5% more smite damage with the military sage effect instead of 10, and your damage factor is 200, so it's definitely lower. But the fourth skill, like, let's argue this is at 5, you go from 5 to 10% damage reduction, right? So that's across the board. So would I rather have 10% extra defense, or would I rather have 5% more all damage taken reduction? I'd definitely rather take the 5% more all damage taken reduction, and the rage engine is just better here, right? Like going from 5 to 20, we really like that, and the probability of dealing more damage stacks it's guaranteed, right? So I think I lean towards 5515, but again, the third skill is totally good, right? I mean, you're dealing smite damage here, you have extra stats, so really however the skills fall here, it's not that big of a deal. But more tanky, more rage on the fourth skill, more smite damage, and stronger smite damage procs on the third skill. And then finally, the last troop type we have to talk about is archers, and I saved them for last because they are the troop type that got a new commander most recently, and also they're the troop type that has the least number of relevant budget build commanders in the game right now. And that's not because they're bad, it's just because their commanders are so good and all of their skills are very relevant. Like Emperor Qin, for example, you can't really budget build him because all of his skills feed off of one another, and he's a complete package. He kind of needs all of it, right? Same thing with Zhuge Liang. Like, you know, you're giving up skill damage on the third skill, the fourth skill you're giving up AoE damage, so it's like, ah man, like these are both such good skills. Maybe you could argue that you don't need the third skill as much, but it's hard to argue anything other than expertise, right? But there are two budget commanders that we're going to talk about. The first one is of course Hermann Prime, and we've talked about Hermann Prime for years now as a great budget commander, and in fact a lot of times the Prime commanders find themselves to be great budget commanders, so that's definitely interesting to note. But at 5551, okay, the last skill being at 1, you get a tremendous amount of value because the active skill is 2000 damage factor, spreads the poison stacks. Second skill gives you all of your stats which you need. The third skill gives you up to 20% more AoE skill damage and 20% defense reduction. We like that, right? The fourth skill is really used to spread poison stacks. Okay, now you are reducing the damage you take versus poison troops, but I mean at maximum stacks it's 3% and 15%, so I mean I don't know, I just really like the damage factor here. Even at max it's low, it's 200, it's even lower at 1, but again what you really want here is to inflict the stacks of poison, right? That's the best part about the fourth skill, is inflicting 2 stacks of poison to up to 3 enemy troops, and whether this is at 1 or 5 you're still inflicting 2 stacks of poison either way, right? So the best part about this skill is equally good at 1 versus 5, and then you know again the rest of this is just kind of a bonus, you know, the damage reduction and the extra damage factor. So for me I think 5551 Hermann Prime is still a really good choice. Now I will say if you're going to be pairing Hermann Prime with Arslan, then you may notice that you would probably prefer having the expertise. The reason for that is because of the fact that you're spreading poison stacks more with the two-headed eagle skill here. So not having the expertise wasn't a huge deal before because you actually casted this like every third skill cycle or something because of how slow he stacked by himself and because of the cooldown. But now that you have Alp involved, you probably would cast this a little more frequently. So again, I think the argument for him being budget build is a little weaker than it used to be, but he also has a stronger talent tree now with the stronger emergency protection and loose formation, so there's that. And then of course the last budget build commander we're going to talk about for archers is Alp Arslan. Now as you guys know, if you saw one of my more recent videos, I am probably in Japan when you're watching this video, which means he might be in the game already, and I unfortunately am resorting to showing you the pictures of his skills instead of just showing you his skills in the game. But if we look at Alp's kit as a budget build commander, there's a couple of different ways that you can run him, right? Of course the first skill is all of his damage and the second skill is all of his stats, so you need both of those skills maxed. If you want to run him 5511 just to test him out, you could try it, but really if you do 5551 then he's going to be really good at debuffing the maximum number of people on the field, right? Because the chance goes from 10% up to 50%, so that's a 5x probability of this occurring. You probably want to do that, right? Otherwise you're going to be spreading debuffs so infrequently that it's like it's a huge bummer. Conversely though, if you wanted to do a 5515, Parthian shot is where you're getting a lot of bonus damage, right? And so I really like having this skill maxed out because it's up to 1,000 extra damage factor when you cast an active skill and there's no cooldown there, and this also maximizes the damage reduction for 3 seconds as well, right? So the way you want to look at this is, okay, if you do 5551 he's going to be more supportive, more utility, spreading more debuffs. If you do 5515 he's going to deal the maximum amount of damage, but the target might not have as many debuffs to utilize Parthian shots to its full extent, so keep that in mind. Really, if we're being honest, Alp Arslan is a second or third archer march commander, and so if you're investing in him you're probably not free to play or low spend, and if you are, you probably should be expertising him regardless, right? So just keep that in mind. I don't think, you know, with Hermann Prime it's like, okay, you can kind of just leave him at 5551, but with Alp you definitely want to get his expertise eventually. It's just how do you want to use him until then? That's up to you, because this expertise frankly is pretty good. I mean you're spreading defense reductions for every debuff you ever do, really kind of insane. And with that being said guys, those are all of the budget build commanders that I would consider using in Rise of Kingdoms in 2026, most of which are just on your way to expertising them eventually, but some of them you might find really strong as a budget build and you just kind of leave them there. Now if you made it all the way to the end of this video, please consider consider dropping a thumbs up on it. It really does help out the channel a ton. It helps get this video out into the YouTube algorithm so other Rise of Kingdoms players might see it. While you're down there, consider subscribing to the channel and clicking the bell to be notified the next time I upload a Rise of Kingdoms video. You guys might think you're subbed because you've watched my videos for a long time, but you're actually not. Double check down below and comment down below any budget build commanders I might have missed. And with that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching. This has been Omniarch. I'll talk to you guys again soon. Peace.